Would you like to learn how to craft a better story for your podcast? Today, I'm going to share with you a book and a course that helped me think differently about stories and, I hope, to make them better. What's happening, podcasters? This is 1000 Podcasters, and I'm Brian Ensminger. I'm a podcaster and a podcast editor, and I'd like to see you be successful with your podcast. Today, I'm back in my regular studio, and it feels good. I'm glad that I can convert this space when we're hosting family or friends, but it really feels good to be back in my normal recording space. This particular episode is part of National Podcast Post Month and also the 30-day solo podcast challenge over at bigpodcast.com. You'll find links to those in the episode notes. My assignment for today's episode is to tell you about a book that helped me change the way I think. And my first thought was about a faith-based book that was pretty powerful for me back in 1996. The book is What's So Amazing by Grace. It's by Philip Yancey, and it helped me think about community and relationships differently. And I certainly see some parallels also in the podcasting community. However, instead of that, I want to share with you a book and a course that impacted me more recently. Last year for Christmas, my brother got me a book. It was a book that I'd been looking at for a while, and I hadn't got it, and so he got it for me. The book is called Out on a Wire, and it's all about storytelling and radio production. It was a really good read. It's actually kind of comic book layout, lots of illustrations. It was a really good read, and it was good for me because it not only covered some of the aspects of storytelling, but it also helped me understand a little bit more of what goes into a narrative style show for radio production. It talked about the different roles, the value of getting different perspectives, the value of having a team, and also the value of making sure that you create a story that has an actual storyline and an actual purpose. At the same time as I was doing that, I was also going through a course that I bought. That particular course was called Power Your Podcast with Storytelling. It was available through Creative Live. It was put together by Alex Bloomberg. And this particular one also talked about framing a story. And the one thing, if I took nothing else away from that, the one thing that I took away was this idea. The idea that you need to understand the story before you start it. And the way they framed it up was the phrase, I'm doing a story about blank, and it's interesting because blank. It took me a little while to work through this and to get a good understanding, because for my other podcast, the Engaging Missions Show, it's an interview style show, and sometimes, as much as I try, I don't really know what's going to be interesting before I get there. But I struggled with, okay, well, I'm doing interviews. What are my interviews about? Well, in the case of most of my interviews, the story's about the guest. It's about their story, their experiences, the things that they've taken away. And sometimes I know what's interesting, or at least what I think is going to be interesting, and sometimes I have to discover it. But because of this, it provided me a simple way to approach this. Not only does it help me frame the story, but sometimes it helps me when I'm going through the editing process to understand what needs to stay and what needs to go, because not everything makes the cut. How about this episode? I'm doing this particular episode as part of a challenge. And you might think, well, okay, but are you going to deliver any value? Well, here's what I think the answer is to that question. I'm doing a story about X. It's interesting because Y. Okay. I'm doing a story about a book and a course that I took. It's interesting because it helped me think differently about my podcast, and my hope is that it will help you as well. Here's the action step for you. I'd like for you to, on your next episode, think about this. I'm doing a story about blank, and it's interesting because blank. If you've never done this before, it might be a little bit uncomfortable. It certainly was for me, but we get better as we practice this. I'm still learning. I hope that you're still learning, because we all continue to learn. And as they told me when I was going through training as a McDonald's manager, if we stop growing, we start dying. So I would encourage you to continue to grow, even when it's difficult and challenging. I'm doing a story about blank. It's interesting because blank. If you do this exercise, hit me up on Twitter. You can find me at Top Tier Audio. Let me know about your story and why it's interesting. I'd really love to hear from you. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do all of that at toptieraudio.com. You can send me an email. You can set up a consultation. You can subscribe to this show. You can contact me directly. You can talk to me about editing. All of that is at toptieraudio.com. Thanks for listening. To go out there and make a great podcast.